Hey guys, I just want to show you a couple of things about our use of, hey, so you can see me, our use of macros and our use of lighting cues or MIDI notes, you might hear me call them. Let's dive in. So I have the countdown cue pulled up right now, and I have this kind of in a, oops, just ignore that. That never happened. There we go. I have this in the countdown mode. We're about to go into the first song. This is an example. So we get done with our Bible overview video and we click on our 1 minute countdown. And as you can see, when we go into this first song, there's these two symbols. Well, what those two symbols represent, they're called actions. And they're a MIDI on cue and a MIDI off cue. So what that's telling our lighting computer here is that the MIDI on cue is going to turn on Worship Purple, the first worship song, and the MIDI off cue is going to turn off the countdown cue. Now they're called MIDI on and off notes or cues because they were actually initially used with keyboards. So you would strike a key on a keyboard and it would translate that note into an action for maybe an audio purpose, or there was just all sorts of creative things they've done with it. Well, now it's been here for a while, but it's also found its way into the video lighting world. And so we're using MIDI on notes and MIDI off notes, even though we're not using a keyboard. It's just the terminology or language that's kind of left over from the keyboard days to communicate between one computer to the next. So when I click on this slide, you're gonna see over here, it's gonna turn off the countdown cue and it's gonna turn on the first worship song cue. So boom. There we go, and you see the lights changing up there. Now, what I've heard some of you be confused about is our use of macros. So you see this M right here. Well, let's go ahead and look at our list of macros. Now, macros, we do use two different macros in worship. One is the song look template, first song, it should say, and the other one is song look template remaining songs. So the first song in the worship set is always going to have that pink macro attached to it. Now that macro has nothing to do with the lighting. It doesn't. It only changes the looks, which are right here, that are being sent to our online audience and our in-person audience. Let me scroll on down to the next song here. So the next song, you can see, has the other macro attached to it, which is the everything after the first song or the remaining songs macro. And it has also two of these communication symbols. Well, that means that there's two MIDI notes attached to that slide that are going to interact with our lighting computer. So when I click on this slide over here, you'll see it transition. So it changes to the next song and it turns off the previous cue. So that's what is actually changing the lighting cues. That's the automated process. The macros, currently, we do not have a macro that has a lighting cue or a MIDI note attached to it. So I know that can be a little confusing because we are using so many different shortcuts and templates and things like that. But just keep that in mind. Whenever you see these little communication symbols, that means that a MIDI note is attached to that slide and it's going to affect your lights. If you see an M of some color with the brackets to the left and right of the M, that represents that there's a macro attached to that slide, but it will not, as of right now, change a lighting cue unless we apply that to the macro. Now, I just made a liar of myself because our pre-roll videos template, which is a macro, does have two MIDI notes attached to it. So you could say that is the only macro we are currently using that has lighting cues attached to it. and it affects our pre-roll video, which is this guy right here, and you see the dark colored M attached to it. So when I click on this slide, it will trigger this macro and all those actions associated with that macro, and it will turn off the pre-service lighting cue and turn on the, what does that say? Countdown lighting cue. So there you have it in a nutshell, macros and MIDI cues.